we're at a point now, there are a lot of Muslims in this country. A lot of people are saying, okay, allow more in, but they have to adapt, like sort of a Catherine Birbalsingh, Michaela School thing. But would you say that's impossible?
Yeah, so I will challenge the idea that it would be even nice even if there is a Union Jack on it. Because I think that people fail to have a theory of mind as to what people think when they adhere to Islamic customs. People think that Islam and some other religions they can be compartmentalized as a comprehensive doctrine of the good purely to your private life, and then the only public exhibition of this is your clothing and the food you might eat. And this is because of a very, I think, Protestant conception of what religion was that applied to kind of have Catholics, Protestants, and Jews live together in Europe under the umbrella of liberal pluralism. And it worked because they all had a common religious sort of root. And also because they have a universalist morality, that they see that each person is made in the image of God and therefore they are to be treated as an end into themselves, sort of Kantian idea. Islam doesn't have that. They have a concept called asabaya, which means clannishness. It means that morality is only to be extended as far as that advantages your family, your clan, and the ummah, the sort of global Muslim ethnicity. This is why they're more preoccupied with the issues of Palestine than they are cost of living in Britain as it goes down the drain. And so on the idea of the burqa, niqab, and hijab specifically, it is not just a headscarf. It is premised on the idea that if girls do not wear that, if they show their hair or their bare skin, they are inviting sexual assault. So it's blaming girls, not just women, but the girls that wear it, including at the Michaela School, even though Catherine Birbalsingh would object to that morality, but the fact that it is present means that the girls and therefore the families inflicting it on them believe in this morality. The idea is that the girls themselves are inviting men to sin, and if they provoke sexual violence, they are to blame for it. That's just not how we do things here. We think all women and men are capable of equal moral dignity. There's a completely incompatible moral tradition. But this strikes at the heart of the idea that the growth of Islam represents an existential threat to our way of life. Like, the foundations of common law and the foundations of Sharia law are irreconcilable. You can't have a little bit of both. It's either one or the other. And this is a multi-generational problem because there is no integration strategy that fixes this by like layering British values, sort of thin version of British identity over the top of it. This is what was proposed in the Now and England conference by historian Robert Toombs, who's very learned in the history of England, but he said the solution to the hijacking of English parliamentary democracy by sectarian Islamic candidates like the 4 Gaza MPs who are now forming a party with Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn was to clone Catherine Birbalsingh, because when you see girls in headscarves reciting Rudyard Kipling, you believe that being English is something you can learn, and if you're required to learn it, you could actually do it. Now again, just reciting poetry does not eradicate all the moral priors that go into that girl wearing a headscarf, and the influence of her family is much more likely to be of a lasting influence on her than 4 or 5 years at the Michaela School. But the reason this is going to be an intergenerational problem is because, per recent ONS statistics and per recent statistics from the Henry Jackson Society, Muhammad is now the most popular baby name for newborns in England. 40% of children have at least one parent who is an immigrant. By 2063, according to Matt Goodwin, we are going to be a minority white British country. I think it's by 2100, over a quarter of the country is going to be Islamic. And according to the Henry Jackson Society polling, among second generation, British-born, university-educated Muslims, 18 to 30, so those that have passed through most of our institutions, have had 30 years here, are the most inclined to assimilate. They believe that 3/4 of them, Hamas did nothing wrong on October 7th. A third of them want Sharia law. 52% want to ban depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. So that is the least assimilable form of Islam if we are being charitable. And that is the one which has demographic and thereby democratic momentum. And more Michaela schools or telling the population to don't look back in anger isn't going to fix this.
I suppose it's still a theory that could work. I mean, we're talking about culture. All those things you mentioned, these are cultural, religious beliefs that you would hope, were there more attempts by the UK government and by the schools to assimilate people, that kind of, I mean, what is it, 53% want homosexuality outlawed and 40% want Sharia law. You would hope that those numbers might go down.
Why would we run a mass demographic experiment that ends in an existential threat to the country?
Because we've got no choice.
Well, we do have choice.
well, we could. I mean,
We absolutely do have a choice, okay? And it doesn't require sort of the most militaristic of forceful expulsions. All we do is we ban cousin marriage. We don't allow the construction of any new mosques. I just don't think we allow them to practice. Frankly, we shouldn't allow a
it's not going to happen.
I'm saying we shouldn't allow. I'm being prescriptive. And also, it depends how bad things get. We could throw away our entirely liberal priors based on the idea that we're all the same underneath and that all cultural differences are totally arbitrary and it can be remedied by more social housing and subsidies and a different school curriculum. If we threw that out, because that is a fiction, we could institute very restrictive policies that would mean that if people commit a crime, they are deported like any other criminal. And if they don't like to live here, they can go and live in one of the many Muslim countries that will facilitate their way of life. Largely, a lot of the reason that these people are here is because they're living off the largesse of the taxpayer. 47% of London's social housing is occupied by first-generation immigrants. 33% of Pakistanis and Bangladeshis have never worked in their life. We're paying billions every year in universal credit to refugee and immigrant households. Why are we battery farming foreigners at our expense if they're living in ethnic enclaves wholly apart from, and in many cases antagonistic to, the native population, and then lobbying for greater representation in government to then have the government act as a sort of client agent on their behalf while neglecting the needs of the British host majority?
Yeah. I think we're a bit screwed, to be honest. I mean, I know that's defeatist, and it actually annoys my viewers sometimes. But I know I get everything that you're saying there. But I just think there's always ways to get into the country. They'll just find a way. And high birth rates and gingers converting to Islam.
I don't think there's that many gingers converting. So I know that 1 in 5. Muslims in prison are now white converts. So that's obviously the prisons themselves have been overrun by Muslim gangs. I mean, they've called themselves the Muslim Brotherhood because, again, they're not very inventive.
Yeah.
As a bunch. I remember it was 2016, a former inmate has said that Belmar should become just a jihadi training camp. And this is why we're getting so many attacks on prison officers by the likes of Axel Rudakabana and the Abedi brother, the living Abedi brother of the Manchester Arena bombing. So I think have an immigration red list. We know the countries that these people are coming from. We know which nationalities are more likely to commit crime. For example, Afghans and Eritreans, the largest nationality that have come over on small boats as of this year, are 20 times more likely than a British national to commit a sex offence. I don't see why we're waging war on our women and girls in that way. I don't think any of these men should be here. They should all be deported. I think we should just prohibit immigration from those areas. I know the chaps at Trigonometry had Kemi Badenoch on recently, and they said, in light of the Pakistani grooming gang scandal, would you ban immigration from Pakistan? And she just said, well, no, I think actually that there's been, great contributions made by people from Pakistan. And it's like, okay, not every Pakistani is Raja Mir or Mohammed Najmi. The vast majority are Mirpuris living in ethnic enclaves in Bradford, Leeds, Rochdale, Rotherham, take your pick, perpetrating horrendous things against our women and girls, or actually knowing what their family members are doing and harboring them because, as the head of the Ramadan Foundation once said, they don't want to be seen as siding with the white enemy. So I think that we should, as well, leverage visas for tourism. We should leverage our foreign aid to ensure that their foreign criminals are returned, because they're currently trying to reject them. We should blacklist certain countries from legal migration, and we should be sufficiently culturally muscular and unapologetic about doing so to deter the people who do not want to live here according to our laws, that do not want to, let's say, assimilate in the traditional way as a sort of member of tribal belonging. You come, you discard your old identity, you have an affinity for the culture of the place, you adopt its faith, and you traditionally marry into the tribe, which is usually what happens. Obviously at the host majority's request. You don't want to force people to do that. How Islamic. And then you would actually have a sort of thriving organic society that would allow us to mix with the admittedly very few people that want to come from other places in the world but actually join the national family, and the rest can either leave of their own accord, or if they commit a crime, they get deported.
I think a lot of immigrants want to join the national family or whatever. A lot of them, I've met loads of immigrants who are super, I don't want to do that, I met them, so they exist, but immigrants often do want to be part of this whole British thing.
Not really.
Yeah.
No, they don't. Okay, so a lot of the time, there's 3 categories. Eric Kaufman's really good on this. There are 3 categories of immigrants. There are sort of people who are hostile to your way of life. So we would describe the Pakistani grooming gangs as this, or Islamic terrorists. And then there is a second category, and that is the people who are wholly indifferent to the culture and the host majority that they live among. I would put Sajid Javid in this category, actually. So Sajid Javid is currently running the Independent Commission on Community and Cohesion to get to the root causes of what caused the Southport riots last summer. And he's only dealing with second-order issues there. So things like social media and mistrust in institutions. He's not dealing with the core problem, which is, the immigration that happened on his watch. The reason I put that, and we can come back to the ICCC in a bit, is because in 2021, when Nigel Farage used to express concern about demographic change and noted that the census had showed that Britain's largest cities were now minority white British, Sajid Javid tweeted, "So what?" So he has a complete indifference to the downgrading in number, in culture, in priority of the host majority in this country, who theoretically his family were taken in by, they fostered good relationships with, and he should prefer, because they're the custodians of said culture, that he would and his family would come to live among. The third category is what Eric Kaufman calls ethno-cultural traditionalists. And this would be me visiting Japan, right? I go to Japan because it's distinctly Japanese. Even as a Christian, I'm not going around there saying, well, you need to abandon all of your Shinto practices and Buddhism because it makes them distinctly Japanese. I would never dream of not only coming and saying your culture's crap, you should adopt mine, but also, I've read a lot about your history. I've lived here for a few years. I'm as Japanese as you are. That sort of level of contempt and condescension does happen when new arrivals, in an antagonistic way, try to redefine what being British is to often encompass its antonyms. This again was the question that was asked at the conference to Robert Toombs and Danny Kruger by our mutual friend Carl Benjamin. He said, if anyone can identify as English, what does being English actually mean? If it really is just a set of platitudes of tolerance and fair play and the rule of law, something which pretty much every other liberal country has, what is distinct about being British? Instead, if there is a British culture or British values or something to identify with them, it flows from a people to whom we ascribe the prefix British. So it all flows downstream from them. So in order to have the culture, the values and things that actually, if we hadn't hollowed out the definition, we would attract a few people we'd want to join the national tribe with a proper understanding of it. In order to have that, to attract those people, you need the people who act as the custodians for whom it is second nature in the first place. And so unfortunately, a lot of immigrants are increasingly hostile, or they're increasingly mercantile. They see nothing wrong with gaming the system, playing the incentives that have been set up by successive governments to take handouts or come over on a work visa and switch to another visa and just live off the teat of the state, and don't actually revere English culture at all, especially because our government has put such downward pressure on it in so many years that it just now means either nothing or it's something to be ashamed of.